Awesome. Hi, Chase.
Hi, Ed. How are you?
Chase is like my favorite person.
And Ed is like my favorite person.
Aw, group hug. All right. We're starting with good vibes. I'm going to share my screen here and I'm going to go through this intro thing really fast because everyone's like, go faster. So your wish is our command. Let's look at the vibe coding landscape. Vibe coding is really, a new thing. It's only been around for, I don't know, 6, 9 months or so, and it's basically the ability to express your intent to an AI and have it write code to deliver on that intent. And so it's just that code is just another language, just like English or French, and AI speaks that language and is somehow magically able to convert what we want to achieve into actual code that can achieve it. Most of these platforms are based on code that was ripped out of uh, GitHub. And so what you've got is a lot of JavaScript and a lot of Python. So when you build these things, if you're using really common platforms like React and Flask and things like that, it has no problem doing it. If you try to get off into other languages and stuff, it gets harder. But the point is, there's a spectrum of how difficult these tools are to use and what exactly they concentrate on and what they do. So at the bottom, you've got just basic LLM. So at this point, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, they can all kind of spin up a little application for you within their own interface. And that can be really helpful for just getting a really quick idea of what something might look like, or even architecting the code, coming up with PRDs. That's still a really good place to start, and you can get some interesting little tools out of that. They're starting to kind of get to the point where they allow you to deploy them, but it's not that seamless. Also, you can't do things like databases and more robust development features. In the middle, you've got kind of the purpose-built vibe coders, and this is like Replit, V0, Bolt, Lovable. And here, what the real intention is to give you the ability to talk to the app, develop an application, iterate on it inside the application, and then deploy it somewhere so people can actually use it. And Replit goes around talking about how great it is and how you can make $1 million app off of it and stuff. I would say if you're working in either of these two worlds, from LLMs up to vibe coders, I would recommend, if you're not a professional developer, not trying to deploy something with any sort of robustness, because it's very easy to make security mistakes and things like that. So these are really great for proving that an application is possible, for getting feedback from users, from testing out what's feasible and things like that. Once you get beyond that, now you're into the coding agent tools, and this is really more built for coders, helping them be more efficient. They tend to be much more in the weeds, like more granular, working on pieces of code rather than whole applications. And the complexity of these kinds of tools is much higher than some of the vibe coding tools. Anything to add, Chase?
No, I think just overall, a really great starting point is to start at the bottom with the LLMs. They all have this canvas or artifact feature, which can do a bunch of awesome things on top of being able to sort of maybe mock up your front end. We'll actually look at that today, kind of what this looks like. And then sort of the next step is taking the vibe coding tools, right? You're going to get the next step. You're going to get authentication. You're going to get databases. You're going to get more durability, but you're opening yourself up to risk. Like you said, there's security concerns, right? You really have to understand how to manage that. And then the coding agents, right? I think they're all great. I use all of these things every day for different things that we prototype together at, or things that I build myself. I started with Cursor because all these tools didn't, weren't there before. And I think you like kind of can't go wrong. Somebody in the chat was saying, Codex greater than Claude Code, or Windsurf better than Cursor, right? At this point, it's a horse race, right? One week Codex is better, one week Claude Code is better. I switch between them personally when I'm doing this. I choose not to use the Gemini Code tools, not because I don't like it, just because I don't need a third tool on top of it. And I think just pick one and go with it. It's always going to be like that. It doesn't matter if it's the chat-based app, it doesn't matter if these vibe coding apps, you sort of just have to pick one. If you have the privilege of buying more than one, then buy more than one and see what's better. But I think again, like I was saying earlier, and Eric was saying, like just do it. Like pick one and get started. You
Yeah, and
can't really go wrong.
work your way up though. Don't start with Claude
Yeah.
Code, like start with the LLMs, work your way into vibe coders, and then if you get really, in the weeds and you're actually going in and tweaking code, then you might start looking at the coding agents.
Yeah.
Okay. So today we're just playing around with this made up doggy AI. We just kind of came up with an idea. I think actually Kyra came up with this one. I really love it. The dog walking application. It's a good size as far as scope goes to help figure out like it's just like big enough that has enough features where it's not trivial, but it's not so big where you have to think about more complicated concerns that some apps might have to have. So. How do you get started on something like this? And this is what we're going to ask Chase to kind of show us. Like, how do you take something you got a vague idea, or maybe you've got a pretty clear idea, um, and you want to start vibe coding it to bring it to life? What are the first steps that you take on?
Okay, so the first steps that I usually take on when I'm going into this is I really need to think about what's the intention around what I'm doing, right? I might have an okay idea here about what I'm going to build, but I keep coming back to this thought. Ed, I read somewhere, there's a quote and it goes something like this, a good economist thinks about the first order effects of something in the economy, and a great economist thinks about like the second order effects, the long-term effects. And so what I'm building here, right? My intention might be to start really small, but as I add features, it's going to have all of these effects on this system that I'm creating, right? I need authentication, I need databases, I need API calls, I need to integrate my LLM, right? Though all of those have second order effects on what I'm building, and I have to kind of intentionally think about those as I'm building them. If I want to move towards something that either I can use or that I can put into maybe production, right? If I have the capability to get there. And so how I usually start these is actually in the LLM, right? So starting at the bottom of that curve that we were kind of talking about here, to really start to think about what is my intention here? What am I going to build? So I built this little prompt, and it's very simple. It's basically like I want you to act as my product manager for this dog walking app that we're gonna build here in Bolt. For background, I have a dog walking business that I've made up. I use it in my neighborhood, and I just want to be able to track some of the dogs that are in my pack. Right while I'm walking them, I want to know how far we walked, what pictures I took, and I want you to track this for me, right, as the dog walker, and I want you to also be able to send this to the client after my dog walk, right? So there's a bunch of hidden things in there that I probably haven't thought about. So I'm going to ask the model, right? I'm going to ask Claude here, can you just ask me three quick questions about the functionality so that I can actually move to a prototype? And I want that end state for this chat session to be a short product requirements document that I can use with a coding agent. And so all of these kind of things that I'm building up, keyword is act like a product manager, build me a product requirements document that I can use for a coding agent. The rest is really just context that I need to give about my business or this application that I want to build here. So we're going to send this off. It's going to ask me probably more than three questions. It's probably going to structure some of the questions with multiple, sub bullet points, and that's okay. I'm not going to answer all of them, but I'm going to start to see like what are some of the implications of this? What do I need to be thinking about from the functionality standpoint? And one of those things that comes back with is like, how do you want to communicate with the client, right? What do you want to send them? Do you want to send them the picture? Do you want to send them the summary? Do they have access to this, right? Directly, this app that I'm building? Do you want it to be some sort of SMS text message?
And
So now we're
what
starting to think about what the system looks like.
and what's great about this is, it's acting when you said act like a product manager, it's thinking like a product manager. So if you don't have product management skills, this is what product managers do is they start to think through the product and like what are the implications, and when you say you want that feature, what does that really mean? So, you know, that's an awesome way to lean on the LLM, not just for the coding aspect, but for helping you think through what exactly do you mean when you think about this app? Like, let's work out some of these details so that we can create something more quickly.
And I think the interesting thing here is like these are all things I didn't think about, right? Ed, like I don't schedule my walks, right? These are all ad hoc walks. Maybe I do want to schedule them sometime at the future, but I think my goal in this stage is like get me the narrowest functionality that drives value so that I'm not trying to boil the ocean with this prototype, right? I can always add functionality on later
Yeah.
through Bolt, which we're going to get into. I'm going to answer some of these questions. I'm not going to
I'll
answer all of them.
I'll
Um,
talk while you're answering. I'll just add on to that like you cannot emphasize this enough that when you're building these vibe coded apps, you absolutely need to narrow the focus to the MVP. What is the smallest app that you can build that suits the purpose that you're trying to do? Because if you go into the vibe code app and you start describing this super complicated application, it's going to get lost. It's going to start making weird mistakes. It'll start overcomplicating things and building out an architecture that's like way too much for what you probably need. And so it's much, much better to start with a really small definition of what you want, and then go from there to, building it out piece by piece. So it's a little bit like, if you're building a house, you might want to start with just a bathroom, a living room, and a bedroom. And then over time, you can, work out to your large mansion. You might want to think about what that mansion is going to be eventually, but that doesn't mean you have to sort of, start building a 15,000-foot foundation from the get-go.
yeah, I mean, and we've kind of narrowed the scope down here so that it's something that we can execute on pretty quickly in the vibe coding tool. You could do this in the vibe coding tool, right? You could do this in Bolt to some degree, but Bolt or Replit or any of the coding agents, they're sort of built for action, right? They do have planning capabilities, so that's why we use the model here, the chat-based model here, just to do the planning and the thinking. And when I build these things, and Ed, we talk about this a lot, is I have the large language model act as my CTO or my product manager as kind of my thought partner to come back to when I'm exploring building new features in an application or prototyping something. And so you can see here, one of the things that we haven't explicitly said is that we want a mobile application. It was sort of implied, right? Because we want to take pictures and we want to track our walk. But you might be explicit. I want this to be a web application. I want this to be something that runs on, locally on my computer. And it's inferred that we kind of need this. And it's even mapped out some user flows here, which is super helpful, right? Because I'm not thinking about really anything other than functionality. And now my product manager here can start to do some of those flows and think about some other important things here. All right. And it's even got this out of scope, which I find super useful. We're just going to copy this and we're going to go over to Bolt here, Ed. And this is just like any other chat interface that you would deal with, Claude, etc. This is just the one we're using for today. I'm just going to paste this in, right? And we're going to see what happens here. And so this is a lot of scope. We're dealing with an agent here, right? So I'm going to expect this to make a plan to execute all these complicated things. I'm going to close this out, and we can see here Bolt starting to do the thinking, and it should come up with that plan of what it needs to execute before it actually goes and starts building. And now I'm not approving this plan. I'm not editing it. I'm sort of taking it at face value, and I see the plan here. It's going to set up the database first. It's going to add some screens in here. It's going to run it and verify that it works. So it's already started working. I can chat in here and give it some feedback on what it's doing, but I can see the sort of provenance of how it gets from the product requirement document here, Ed, to the eventual app that we're gonna
And
get to.
And Bolt didn't add this thinking piece just because it's cool or because, they thought it was, something that consumers would like. This is really important as part of the development process. So this is kind of how a developer thinks, right? They'll take a project and then they'll decompose it into steps and they'll start attacking the steps one at a time. And when you use a vibe coding or a coding agent like Claude Code or Cursor, oftentimes that's what you're doing too, is you'll put you'll actually describe the product and you'll break it down into pieces and then you'll just work one piece at a time to get the project done. So it's a lot like this, but going a little bit slower and a little bit more manually.
So we can see here, like at this point, Ed, this planning piece is so powerful, right? We could go and walk away for 5 minutes, get a cup of coffee, do whatever we need to, and come back. I think the expectation at this point is that we're going to roughly get what the app looks like, get the kind of base functionality here, but it's not all going to work right off the bat. We've given it this large task to complete. I expect most of the functionality to work, but there's going to be some things that are going to not work, right? And we're going to need to kind of iterate on as we get into this a little
And
bit more.
a lot of code is being written right now. It's kind of mind-blowing actually how much code it needs to be written in order for even the most simple app to work on these things. So as it's going through, this could take up to 15, 20 minutes sometimes for it to do all this stuff. So, but I think it's cool to watch it and see what kinds of things it's doing. And oftentimes as you look at this planning, you might see something in there where you're like, oh, wait a second, that's not right. Like it misinterpreted the the instructions or something, or it's made a strange choice for, it's got SMS and email notification systems like, ooh, that might be a little bit tricky because I'm going to have to use Twilio or something like that. And that's not what I don't really want to go through the burden of setting that up, setting up API keys, et cetera, for that kind of thing. So, those are the kinds of things where you might want to edit its choices.
Yeah. And one of the things here, somebody's just looking at in the chat, is it's actually building the back end here, right? This is not a front end prototype, right? It's writing the database schema to manage the dogs, the owner, the phone number, the walk, associating that dog with that walk, right? So it's doing all of that. And I don't know if it's actually building in authentication here, but you can see it's building in the the camera for photo capture. It's going to implement the GPS functionality on this to track where we actually went. So you're getting a full service kind of prototype here, and you can ask for more, right? But you can't guarantee that the authentication is going to be completely secure, right? I'm not going to go up here after this first one, Ed, right, and click publish and send it off to you and expect the database to be exactly right to have all the functionality work. But while this is building, Ed, maybe we can just go back into this chat here. And one of the cool things that you can do, like we were mentioning with the large language models, is we can actually ask something like ChatGPT or Claude to sort of mock this up, right? Like it's sort of a click-through prototype that doesn't have that back-end functionality, just so we can start to imagine, what this really feels like. So all you have to do, it's a couple keywords here in Claude. It's like, can you build, this app in an artifact slash app? And you can do the same thing in ChatGPT too. You can tell it to use a canvas and it will mock up what this looks like. And you're going to get that click through feel. You're not going to have the authentication, but you're getting a kind of front end prototype that maybe doesn't look the best, is not the sexiest, but kind of works and shows you the functionality here. And let's see. I mean, this is a lot of code, right, Ed? I mean, it's
In
one big file.
yeah, it tends to write like these kind of mega React uh, files or whatever. I would also say that in Bolt and in the coding apps, the vibe coding apps, it's also possible to do things that we're not demonstrating. Like you can give it a picture. You can say, here's the design that I really like. I like the look and feel of this site, but I want my app, so copy this design. And it usually does okay. It'll get close to the design. I think in Bolt, you can connect Figma So if you have designs, you can actually connect directly to Figma and say, yeah, use these as your starting point. So all of these tools are starting to kind of converge where they're trying to rely on the tools we already use for product development and kind of lean into those to um, to make this happen.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of tools that are useful, right? This is basically skipping over that Figma, right? In
Yeah.
here, okay, I've got my, this is what my app could look like here. I've got the ability to see the number of dogs, the number of clients. I can start a new walk. I can manage my clients. I can see the walk history here, right? I can add this, test, test. It'll probably save it. Okay, so there I am, right?
So it didn't do any validation for your phone number. These are the
Right.
things where it's like, oh, these are the things that you have to kind of mind it on.
Right. And now I can start a new walk. Now, I'm not going to expect this to work, right? Because it doesn't have any of the GPS functionality. It's sort of faking all of this information. I can upload a photo, but I really want to use my camera, right, to take the photo. I don't want to upload it, afterwards. Okay, so we'll send the walk summary. Here's my dogs here. Okay, so I get a rough feel for this, right? And we're going to expect kind of the same thing from both, but more, right? We're going to expect the backend functionality. I just got the little notification that it's done, Ed. So let's hop back into Bolt and see what we've got here. Okay. So
Token costs can get pretty high on these apps, especially as the apps get more complicated and you start iterating on them and you're trying different, you're trying to add different features and stuff. And so, you might expect to spend, if you worked at this all day, $100 on a day for an intense like coding application. And so you're thinking $100, like that's like so much money. But think about what you would pay a developer to build a tool like this. I mean, it would be thousands and thousands. So, um, that kind of you have to kind of sort of set your expectation costs on this when you think about on costs when you think about these types of activities.
yeah. And I think one thing too is, right, we got our V1. We're gonna have to iterate after this because we know it's not all gonna work, right? We've got to test it ourselves and see what doesn't work and go back there to the model to Bolt and ask it, fix this. Okay, so we've got some stuff here. We've got the database. It's created tables for all of this so it can store it. It's got a dashboard, right? So it gives you a summary of what it did afterwards, usually non-technical, but you can take this back into Claude, if it was more technical and ask it to explain it to you. And so let's just look at the database really quickly on some of those technical features. And this is the real power of something like Bolt or any of these coding agents. So I've got clients, right? This is where my clients are going to live. This is where my dogs are going to live. These are where the walks are, right? So it's done a pretty good job of building this out. If we talk to a real developer, Ed, one of our friends that we work with, probably not, maybe not the most efficient how they would lay it out, right? But it'll work, right? This thing will work. So let's go add some of our clients here. All right, so we got a blank screen here when there's no clients. That's not super awesome, but we're going to get the functionality working. Okay, let's take Ed. We're going to put in a fake phone number here, and we're going to put test@ed.com. And let's see what happens here. Okay, save. Let's see, is it going to add a client? Uh, 111, 111, 111, 1. Maybe it needs that.
Too many buttons.
Let's give it a refresh. Let's add another one. Let's try it again.
Welcome to vibe coding. So this is the kind of thing that happens too, is that you get your beta, it looks good, you start playing with it, and there's some little bug in there. The AI does not, it can't presage every possible thing that can happen. And this is what is going on with, even with coders and stuff. A coder would never write this much code before testing it. And so, but what's amazing is like you can then start chatting with it and say, hey, I'm not able to add a user for some reason. And it'll say, so that's what Chase just said. And then it'll say, okay, let me look into that. And now that you've narrowed it for the tool, it can go look at its own code and say, let's see, what did I write here? Like, where's the bug? And it can debug itself. Some of the newer coding tools, I'm not sure if Bolt does this. I know Replit does it. They have a little browser that they can actually run and look at the screen as if they were a person. And that helps them sort of debug what's going on as well.
Okay, let's test it again. It looks like it came back. And I think one thing too, Ed, is that, I'm just explaining what's not working, right? I'm not saying that this specific, functionality here doesn't work, or this file or this API call, right? I'm sort of letting the model figure that out. Now that's dangerous because I just spent 30 minutes before this testing this, and I couldn't get one of the things to work
Mm.
because I didn't know enough about it. So let's add a dog here. We'll just call it Barry. And
Right.
so now Ed has a dog. Okay, so I've got a history here. I've got my dashboard. I can manage my clients from here. And the cool thing is this I could actually pull this up on my phone using what's called Expo and actually test this on my phone, but we're kind of doing it from the browser here. So I'm going to start the walk. And we're going to walk Barry, Ed, and we're going to start here. And okay, so I'm not running out in the parking lot with my computer, so we're not getting any miles here. It looks like the minutes aren't working, but I can actually take a photo. Okay, so this is my
Wow.
camera hooked up here. It built all that functionality out, so we'll give it a thumbs up. And let's see if it saves the photo. Doesn't look like it saves the photo. Okay, and we're going to end the walk. And it's giving me a little preview summary here. But Ed, let's go to the one that I built that I kind of know works. I know that this is important, right? Like going through this and testing it is the hardest part and kind of iterating with it. But I want to show you, I spent probably 20 or 30 minutes on this one earlier, just to work out some of these kinks. And so let's go here. And you can see different prompt, me working with it, still the same basic outcome, right? I've got my clients, I've got the ability to walk, I've got the camera functionality that I've kind of worked out and done the testing on. So I think the process, Ed, is like get your V1 or V0 out there, test it, iterate on it, fix all the things as if you were going to actually use it like a real user, chat with Bolt or whatever your tool is, and keep doing that over and over. That's where you get into spending a lot of time and a lot of credits and tokens that you were talking about, Ed. But I think if it's fruitful for enough for you, or if it's just fun, then it's something that you should go through. Okay, I've already got my clients set up here. Just really quickly, there's Bed, there's Air. Ed's dog and my dog, and we're going to start a new walk here, and we're going to walk both of these dogs at the same time. Okay, so it's got my dogs here. Now my duration is actually working on this one, so it's doing a real-time counter. I'm not actually moving, so there's probably something wrong with that. But I can do that same thing, take a photo, and actually stores the photo here so I can see it. So I'll take another one, right? You can imagine if I was on my phone, I'd be doing this, and then we're going to end the walk here. And let's see if the end walk button works. Okay, had to click it twice. And now I get my summary. We'll put a great walk in here. But one of the features that's not hooked up, like you were talking about earlier, Ed, like Twilio or email, any of these things, is that I need an API key, right? I need to actually use another service that's not baked into this in order to get some of that functionality going. I'm going to click send walk here, and it'll show up in my history for that.
If you do need to get an API key, you can talk to an AI about like how to get that API key, how to sign up for Twilio or something like that. That's and sort of where to put it in the code. You didn't show the code yet, did you, on this app?
Yeah, let's look at the code here. All right, so this is all my beautiful AI written code here. I don't know what a lot of this means, right? You can always, ask Bolt or ask your coding agent to explain any of these things to you, but this is where my app lives in here. There's a layout that gives me the layout for the whole app, right? Here's the walking functionality. When I'm actively on a walk, it's going to display and load the data about the dogs. At this point, not super fruitful for me to know this, but as I continue building it is good for me to understand what's kind of going on here in layman's terms, so I can start to work with within the bounds of the kind of system that I've created here.
If you're building an app that's just for yourself, and isn't like a isn't hooked into any sort of like sources for privacy violations or isn't sharing data in any weird ways, and then you can publish and you can put a login feature on top of these things like fairly easily with Clerk, and have a relatively secure app that just you can use or you can share with, whitelist with friends and stuff like that. Um, if you were thinking like, oh, I want to start a company and build an app and have this sort of really robust thing, maybe, you wouldn't do that here. You would actually get it to a place where it's like, okay, I've proven out that there's some value. I've shared it with some, test users and things like that. And I've proven that it's viable. And then you would invite someone, like a developer to look at the code and say, okay, if we wanted to make this production ready, big application, what would we need to do? And the person might look at it and go, hey, this is already pretty good. We'll add some other stuff. My guess is that probably a professional developer would look at it and go, cool, let me start over on a more like robust platform that is like ready for growth on, a different set of technologies and a stack that is more manageable over time. So, I just want to set expectations for people that you can do a lot with vibe coding. You can build real like utility, you can build real programs that are helpful for you, but don't expect this to be like the next Microsoft Word or the next Slack. It's probably not going to happen on Bolt.
Yeah, I'll just add here, Ed. Um, on the side, I love working on these personal projects for me using Vibe coding because I can get, my ideas out and test them and play with them. I have a lot of fun doing it. I spend way too much time doing it. But even for me, I'm not a developer, right? It takes so much time and effort to sit here and iterate on this to get it even close to production ready, to make sure I've got security, to make sure my API routes are, protected, right? Knowing what I know, it's still a lot of work because I'm not a developer, but it can be done. You have to have some of the prerequisites to understand what could go wrong, what will go wrong. I can't just rely on this thing to tell me and build everything, to my specifications. It's still a large language model. It's still going to mess up in a lot of these ways. So.
But
This one actually does have auth too. I asked it to do auth and it does work, right? I didn't have to tell it or integrate with anything, which is great, but the other one didn't, right? So now I'm sort of thinking, I have to be thoughtful about this. I didn't mean to cut you off, Ed. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like Chase said, just start trying it. Just play with Claude or ChatGPT and build some little apps, or go to Bolt and build something and play. You really can't do anything wrong. And you don't have to be a developer to understand what's like, or to interact with it and make things happen. And you'll get a really good feel for what the limitations and the capabilities of these things are after just like an hour of playing with them.